Hello Masters and welcome back. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving a little bit of an overview of where we're going in the next couple of lessons, because this again is a set of tools that is not only going to be something that helps you to work through your biggest shame, guilt, blame stories in the kind of like micro sense of working with a really painful story. It's also going to be the foundation for you starting to really feel the subtle difference between something that feels bad because it's really not true and anchoring in what that feeling feels like so that you can use that feeling and that awareness as a tool for the rest of your life, and figuring out the difference between something that feels bad because it's untrue and something that feels uncomfortable or scary or not good because reality is just uncomfortable or scary or not good. Because this is one of those things where when I say if it feels like shit, it's not true. What I mean is that there's always something more to see when we feel completely disempowered and completely incapable when we're faced with a certain reality. Because in adult life, there is always the capacity to meet ourselves and to love ourselves and support ourselves, rather than being completely in a state of self-abandonment and like the world is falling apart and no love and no connection exists. So as we're getting more advanced and more nuanced in this work, we want to start to be able to differentiate the idea of if it's true, it's going to feel good, and reality always feels good, and truth always feels like the best thing that we would want, versus the truth always has freedom as part of its underlying feeling. Because when we understand the truth, that's when we're the most empowered to do whatever we're going to do within the situation. Even if the situation is really hard and really uncomfortable, and maybe it's not something that we can actually change the situation right now or ever. It's that we learn how to embrace reality for how it is, and that there's always going to be a freedom in that. And that we learn to find our strength and our empowerment in supporting ourselves within the reality that exists. So again, it's kind of like when we're believing a lie, we are disempowered because we are not able then to take correct steps within reality. We are not able to interact with the reality for how it actually is in order to find what our steps are. If we are not clear on what the actual circumstances are, we can't make good choices about what to do about those circumstances. That's why when we understand truth, there's always a level of freedom in it, because it's like, okay, I get what's actually happening, and therefore I have my best chance at doing whatever it is that I can do within the circumstance. But more than that, what this work is for is to really anchor in this idea that when something feels as horrible as one of our shame, guilt, or blame stories, that we start to rewire that feeling as our automatic sign that we're seeing something incorrectly, rather than what most of us do, which is we feel or we think something horrible, we think something painful, we witness something painful, we perceive something painful. We feel that painful feeling. We feel the feeling that comes with that shame or that guilt or that blame story. And we use our story to reinforce that that feeling means that the story is true. Do you see what I'm saying here? We feel that negative feeling. And then we say, the more I feel this negative feeling, the more true the situation is. We believe the story first, and then we assume that the feeling is there to validate the story. And then every time we feel that feeling, it validates whatever story is going along with that feeling. And that's how we get in these loops where we think a painful thought, we think a painful story about ourselves. And if someone like me were to come up and say, okay, well, how does that thought feel? The most common answer I get is, it feels true. And I say, okay, so what do you mean by it feels true? And what you really mean is that it feels familiar. This is what I always feel when I think this thought. And then we're assuming that that repetition of the feeling means, that familiarity means that it's validating the thought. And so these two things are just feeding into each other, right? Every single time we think that thought, we feel that feeling. That feeling says, okay, the thought is true, which then makes the thought stronger, which then makes the feeling stronger, which then makes the thought stronger, which then makes the feeling stronger. And they play off of each other until every time we feel that feeling, we think whatever thought is associated with it must be true. Yeah? So in this work, we're going to do one of the most challenging and sort of like advanced exercises I know to do, which is to say we are setting up a bright line. We are setting up a bright line that we are going to choose our most common shame, guilt, and blame story. So every single one of us has that loop that we get in, the I'm not good enough loop, that if I could just change my job, if I could just find the right relationship, if I could just change my personality, if I could just find my purpose. When we are feeling struggle in life, when we are feeling uncomfortable feelings, we'll get into this later. The main shame, guilt, and blame story that we know runs in our head over and over and over again, that we act on over and over and over and over again, that is that loop that we get caught in over and over and over again. We all have it. We all have one or two. And it's that place we go on a regular basis. And we'll get into why we go there and how we go there. It gets triggered over and over and over again. And the first thing to understand is that this story is always going to make perfect sense to us. We're going to have a ton of evidence for why this story is absolutely true, and why what we think we need to do to fix it is absolutely true. And then we're going to have all these negative, painful feelings that are reinforcing that it's true. And then when we go to act on it, we're going to have all of these high energy, high intensity, anxiety, manic feelings behind that action. Sometimes it's going to feel like high, like, oh my God, I'm going to do it. I'm finally doing it. I'm finally breaking through. Sometimes it's going to feel like I have to do this. Oh my gosh. And sometimes it's going to be, I literally am stuck. I don't know what to do. I'm drowning in the fact that I can't change this thing. We all have those loops. So as I said in the writing, like, my thing was, I'm swollen and I'm puffy and I'm fat. And for a long time, that was just the narrative. It was just like every day, multiple times a day, for years, I would feel like, ugh. I just blamed all of my pain and all of my issues on my body, and on my body size specifically. And like I say, we all have that thing for us, that thing that we go to over and over again, of the, if I could just fix this about myself, my whole life would be better. And this can even be, if I could just stop watching Netflix and drinking and binging and whatever it is. If I could just stop being this way in my personality. If I could just get to this level of wealth, or this level of success, or this number of likes and follows. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's just, we all have that thing. And we're all completely convinced that our pain would be solved if we fixed this thing, and that our pain is being caused by this thing. And like I say, it's going to be completely logical to us. And we're going to have all the stories in the world to justify that we're right about this. This is our main shame, blame, guilt story. So what is that story for you? And we have to get honest with ourselves. It's like, what is that thing that you constantly loop as, that you constantly loop into? That is your point of why you maybe even came to this course in the first place. That thing you wanted to fix about yourself. What is that story? The thing that's wrong with you, what is that story? And we're going to make a bright line. We're going to take that story in this advanced work. So we were gentler with it in the process of awakening to reality. In this work, we're making a bright line. We're saying now, every single time I tell myself this story, from now on, my new task is to understand that there's something under this story. That this isn't what it's really about. Because if it were, I would have fixed it by now. If it were really just about this thing, I would have figured it out. Because again, I'm going to say that our shame, blame, guilt stories are usually centered around some sort of vague, I need to become this vague thing. We need to fix our bodies, we need to change our personalities, we need to find our purpose, we need to have money, we need to have a partner. But it's not a very specific, measurable, when I have this thing, it will be great. And we're not taking into account that no matter what it is we achieve, and no matter, even if we get to that thing we think we want, it's always going to change. Life is always going to evolve. We're never going to have something and hold it exactly as that forever. That thing we think we need in order to be happy, even if we get it, we could never sustain or maintain it. Because that's not how life works. So again, most of the time, our shame, blame, guilt, scapegoaty story is vague. So taking a moment here just to ask yourself, this thing you're trying to change about yourself, or this thing you're trying to achieve, or this thing you think is going to make you happy if you had it, or make you worthy, or make you good enough. What is it specifically? How would you know that you got there? Can you even define what it is that would be good enough? And if you can't, that's your sign that it's a shame, blame, and guilt story. There's something underneath. And even if you can, I would say, is it sustainable and maintainable? Will you be able to have that thing? And if your happiness and your worthiness is dependent upon having this thing, are you setting yourself up for a lifetime of never feeling good? Because you're waiting for a thing that you can't make permanent. So we got to get really honest with ourselves here. And like I say, for me, I said to myself, okay, this is my story over and over and over again. But what if I never get there? What if it never happens? What if I never get the body of my dreams? Am I going to be miserable for the rest of my life? Am I going to hate myself for the rest of my life? And then the second thing was, even if I get that body, I'm going to age. I'm going to get sick. Life is going to happen. I'm never going to be able to sustain and maintain it. So am I never going to be happy? Am I never going to be able to feel good enough? And like I say, that's when I started to realize, like, okay, I think this is a scapegoat. I don't think this is reality. Even though I've been rejected about my body, and my body's in actual pain, right? Like, I'm physically ill for my whole life. But my pain is because my body is not right. And if I could just get my body right, everything would be great. I started to realize that's my story that I go to every single time. And I started to realize that I'm going to this every single time because that's the only thing I actually felt like I had some sort of autonomy or control over within the reality of what I was told I was supposed to do and be that I wasn't able to live up to. So again, you're going to discover this for yourself. What is your shame, blame, guilt story? That is your chronic thing that you go to. And can we start to open up to the idea that from now on, we're making a bright line that this story is not reality. As much as it seems like it might be reality, as much as we have stories to prove that it's reality, your shame, blame, and guilt story is not true. Bright line. There's more underneath it. There's something underneath it. There's something deeper. But if we don't make the bright line that no matter what, from now on, we approach this story from the lens of observing it first. So to even just witness that we're telling ourselves that story before we run off and are doing something about it or believing it is a huge first step. That's why you need to identify what your story is. And then we witness that story. And we make a bright line every single time. It's not really about this. It may be part of what's going on. There may be elements, right? Like my body actually was sick and there were things I needed to do about it. But it wasn't about my body size. It was not that when I get thin, everything will be good. So every time I thought it's because I'm fat, I was like, this is a scapegoat. This is my story and it is not true. And we set that bright line because otherwise we have so much evidence to support that our story is true that we will say, today it's true. I can tell it's true today and here's all the reasons why it's true. I feel that it feels true, it's true. We have to set a bright line with ourselves, make it a non-negotiable, that every single time this story comes up, we know we're in scapegoat land. We know there's something deeper here. We're going to use this as our entry point into deepening our awareness of ourselves and reality. And I also want to say that this main shame, blame, and guilt story, for most of us, is going to be a tool for seeing so much reality. It's going to be our way of accessing so much information. It's not just, this isn't reality, so there's this one other reality. There's so much more that you're going to see, that you're going to work with this story for years probably. And it's going to reveal so much about you and about reality to you. But we have to start with, every single time this story comes up, it's my invitation to question. Every single time this story comes up, it is my invitation to question reality. And we make it a bright line so that we're not in decision fatigue, so that we don't have to decide if we're going to do that today. Because most of the time we will decide not to. We will validate our story and we'll be off to the races. So in this advanced work, we're making it a bright line. What is your main shame and blame and guilt story? And can you draw a line in the sand that from now on, when that story comes up, you're going to witness it, you're going to witness what you want to do about it, you're going to witness all the evidence you have for it, that's all we're witnessing. And then we're going to say, I don't know why, I don't know how, but this is not reality. We're opening ourselves to this pattern interrupt that is the catalyst for so much awareness. Can you make a bright line about your main shame, blame, and guilt story? It is not true. From now on, it's an opening to question. So sit with that, feel what your story is, get honest with yourself about what your story is, and then get ready for the medicine of this story to be the greatest thing that ever happens in your life. If you're willing to question it, there's so much reality to see, but we make it a bright line. Okay? So we'll stick with that, and then we'll take it deeper next week. So what's your story? Can you start to witness it? And without knowing what the truth is, without knowing what the answer is, because there's going to be so much information, like I said, coming forward. We doubt it first, without needing evidence. We're doubting the story first, and then we're going to look for the evidence. We're not going to wait for the evidence for how the story is not true before we start doubting it. Okay, so that's step one. It's a big step. It's a scary step. Read through the materials, and we'll see you next week.